Today I would like to present parts of one of my favorite books, one of the most important books in personal development for me, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Here is that book. And I would like to read you today a part of that. The part related to two principles, being proactive or being reactive. I highly recommend this book. It is very holistic approach, much principle based on personal development and on developing internal skills, internal values, and also external manifestations of those values. As I said, this is really holistic approach. It's not very often to find this type of writing, and it focuses on developing seven habits which refer to internal qualities and external qualities as well. So, as promised, today we'll speak about being proactive and being reactive. After this video, you can decide which type of person you are and which type of reactions are present in your life. So, let's start. While the word proactivity is now fairly common in management literature, it is a word you won't find in most dictionaries. It means more than merely taking initiative. It means that as human beings, we are responsible for our own lives. Our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. We can subordinate feelings to values. We have the initiative and the responsibility to make things happen. Look at the word responsibility. Response ability. The ability to choose your response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. They do not blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. Their behavior is a product of their own conscious choice, based on values, rather than a product of their conditions based on feelings. Because we are by nature proactive, if our lives are a function of conditioning and conditions, it is because we have by conscious decision or by default chosen to empower those things to control us. In making such a choice, we become reactive. Reactive people are often affected by the physical environment. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it isn't, it affects their attitude and their performance. Proactive people can carry their own weather with themselves. Whether it rains or shines makes no difference to them. Value driven. And if their value is to produce good quality work, it isn't a function of whether the weather is conducive to it or not. Reactive people are also affected by the social environment, by the social weather. When people treat them well, they feel well. When people don't, they become defensive or protective. Reactive people build their emotional lives around the behavior of others, empowering the weaknesses of other people to control them. The ability to subordinate an impulse to a value is the essence of proactive person. Reactive people are driven by feelings, by circumstances, by conditions, by their environment. Proactive people are driven by values, carefully thought about, selected and internalized values. Proactive people are still influenced by external stimuli, whether physical, social, or psychological. But the response to the stimuli, conscious or unconscious, is a value based choice or response. As Eleanor Roosevelt observed, no one can hurt you without your consent. In the words of Gandhi, they cannot take away our self respect if we do not give it to them. It is our willing permission, our consent to what happens to us that hurts us far more than what happens to us in the first place. I will repeat that. It is our willing permission, our consent to what happens to us that hurts us far more than what happens to us in the first place. I admit this I admit this is very hard to accept emotionally, especially if we have had years and years of explaining our misery in the name of circumstance or someone else's behavior. But until a person can say deep and honestly, I am what I am today because of the choices I have made yesterday, that person cannot say, I choose otherwise. And here is one beautiful example uh, taken from life. Once in Sacramento, when I was speaking on the subject of proactivity, a woman in the audience stood up in the middle of my presentation and started talking excitedly. It was a large audience, and as a number of people turned to look at her, she suddenly became aware of what she was doing, grew embarrassed, and sat back down. But she seemed to find it difficult to restrain herself and started talking to the people around her. She seemed so happy. I could hardly wait for a break to find out what had happened. When it finally came, I immediately went to her and asked if she would be willing to share her experience. "You just can't imagine what's happened to me," she exclaimed. "I'm a full-time nurse to the most miserable and ungrateful man you can possibly imagine. Nothing I do is good enough for him. He never expresses appreciation, he even acknowledges me. He constantly harps at me and finds fault with everything I do. This man has made my life miserable, and I often take my frustration out on my family. The other nurses feel the same way. We almost pray for his demise. And for you to have the gall to stand up there and suggest that nothing can hurt me, that no one can hurt me without my consent, and that I have chosen my own emotional life of being miserable, well, there was just no way I could buy into that. But I kept thinking about it. I really went inside myself and began to ask, do I have the power to choose my response? When I finally realized that I do have that power, when I swallowed that bitter pill and realized that I had chosen to be miserable, I also realized that I could choose not to be miserable. At that moment I stood up. I felt as though I was being let out of San Quentin. I wanted to yell to the whole world, I am free, I am let out of prison. No longer am I going to be controlled by the treatment of by the treatment of some person. Nice story, isn't it? It's not what happens to us, but our response to what happens to us that hurts us. Of course, things can hurt us physically or economically and can cause sorrow, but our character, our basic identity, does not have to be hard at all. In fact, our most difficult experiences become the crucibles that forge our character and develop the internal powers, the freedom to handle difficult circumstances in the future and to inspire others to do as well. Think well about what I have read. Think about the principles of being proactive and think about the principles of being reactive. You should always remember that between the stimuli and the response, there is always a place for freedom of choice. We very often think that we are conditioned by our external circumstances. We think that 100% responsibility lies behind us, or even if not 100, the most of the responsibility. For example, in case of the fire at your house, you may think that you are totally dependent on what is happening, but it's not true. Still, you can have different kind of responses, different kind of response. You can, for example, save your family, save your children, do your best to save your family, or you may be oriented on saving the items and the things that you have at your house. Still, you have some field to respond, to freely respond, even in such circumstance. And of course, also remember what is the difference between being reactive and proactive. Remember that the proactive person has more freedom. In the proactive model, your response still may be based on your self-awareness, your imagination, your conscience, and your free will. If you are in the responsive model, you're a responsive person. You're like a dog that is pulled on the leash. Of course, what is pulling you are the external circumstances and maybe some external emotions, emotions of other people. Remember that it is more freely to be proactive than reactive. Refer to your own life. It may happen that you won't decide that you are fully proactive or fully reactive. Much depends, on your habitual patterns and habitual reactions. But it's really good to analyze your reactions in different situations and think what you want to choose, to be reactive or to be proactive. I hope you take much valuable things from this video, and uh, let's meet tomorrow when I will be broadcasting a new video, new lesson. All the best for you. Bye.